You are watching Relationship Psyche, the channel where we uncover the hidden psychology behind attraction, relationships, and human behavior. Today's topic is something most men completely misunderstand. They think women want more attention, more texts, more compliments, more effort. But what if the very thing you're giving her is the reason she's losing interest? And what if the one thing women become obsessed with is something almost nobody talks about? By the end of this video, you'll understand why some men are impossible to forget and why others get ignored despite trying so hard. Let's get into it. Imagine this. Two men are interested in the same woman. The first gives her constant attention. He texts first, replies instantly, always checks in, always available. The second man doesn't play games, but he gives her something far more powerful, something rare, something she almost never experiences. Weeks later, she can't stop thinking about him, not because he gave her more, but because he gave her the one thing attention could never replace. And once you understand what that thing is, the way you see attraction will change forever. Most men grow up believing a simple formula. If you want a woman to like you, give her more attention. So they do exactly that. More messages, more compliments, more availability, more chasing. But attention is everywhere. Every day she receives messages, notifications, likes, reactions. Attention has become one of the cheapest currencies in modern life. The problem isn't that you're giving attention. The problem is that you're offering something she already has in abundance. And people rarely value what is easily available. So, what is the thing women truly crave? Presence. Real presence. Not physical presence. Not constant communication. Emotional presence. Being fully engaged when you're there. Most people listen while waiting for their turn to speak. Most people look at their phones. Most people hear words without understanding feelings. But when someone makes another person feel genuinely seen, something powerful happens. Because feeling understood is far more intoxicating than feeling noticed. And very few people know how to do it. Think back to the people you've never forgotten. It usually wasn't the most attractive person, or the richest, or even the most exciting. It was often the person who made you feel understood. Someone who noticed things others ignored. Someone who remembered small details. Someone who paid attention to who you were, instead of who they wanted you to be. Psychologists have long observed that people form deeper emotional connections with those who make them feel validated and understood. Not because it's magical, but because it satisfies one of the deepest human needs, the need to feel seen. Here's where it gets interesting. Most men compete by talking more. The rare man stands out by understanding more. And understanding creates emotional impact. When a woman feels truly understood, she relaxes, she opens up, she becomes more emotionally invested because she feels safe enough to be herself. And people naturally gravitate toward those who make them feel emotionally safe, not because they're perfect, but because they're rare. The moment most men learn this, they make a mistake. They turn presence into a strategy. And the moment it's a strategy, it stops being real. Women are remarkably good at sensing authenticity. You cannot fake genuine curiosity. You cannot fake genuine interest. You cannot fake genuine understanding for very long. Sooner or later, the mask slips, and people always remember how you made them feel. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah had plenty of men giving her attention, texts every day, compliments every day, constant validation. But there was one man she couldn't stop thinking about. Not because he showered her with attention. In fact, he texted less than most. What made him different was simple. Whenever they spoke, he listened. He remembered details. He noticed things nobody else noticed. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt understood, and that feeling stayed with her long after the conversation ended. The reason most men never discover this is because attention feels productive. You can measure it, count it, increase it, but presence is different. Presence requires patience. Presence requires confidence. Presence requires genuinely caring about another person's experience. And in a world obsessed with speed, few people are willing to slow down enough to offer it, which is exactly why it remains so valuable. So what does presence actually look like in practice? Because I think that word gets thrown around a lot without anyone explaining what it really means in a conversation. Real presence isn't complicated, but it is uncommon. It means you stop thinking about what you're going to say next while the other person is still talking. It means you let her finish a thought completely before you respond. It means you notice the small things, the way her voice changes when she talks about something she loves, or the thing she mentioned once and never brought up again. When you're truly present with someone, they feel it in a way they can't quite explain. And that feeling is far more memorable than anything you could ever say to them. Here's something most people don't expect to hear. Genuine curiosity is more attractive than confidence. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive. We're always told that confidence is the thing, that you need to walk into a room and own it. And confidence absolutely has its place. But curiosity does something confidence can't do on its own. Curiosity says to another person, you are interesting enough to explore. When a man is genuinely curious about who she is, not performing interest, not asking questions from a script, but actually wanting to understand how her mind works, she feels something shift. Because most people go through life being looked at. Very few people go through life being truly noticed. Curiosity is how you cross that line. There's a concept in psychology that doesn't get nearly enough attention in conversations about attraction, and it's this. The emotional space you create around someone matters just as much as what you say to them. When a woman feels like she has to perform around you, like she needs to be interesting or impressive or funny, she's never truly comfortable. But when you create a space where she feels like she can just be exactly who she is, something opens up. She stops managing herself and starts actually experiencing the conversation. And that shift from performing to simply being is something she will associate with you. You become the person who made her feel free. And that kind of feeling is almost impossible to walk away from. Most men are taught to fill silence, to keep the conversation going, to always have something ready, to never let a moment sit without adding to it. But restraint is its own kind of power. A man who doesn't feel the need to fill every silence, who doesn't chase every lull in the conversation with another story or another compliment, that man communicates something very specific. He communicates that he's comfortable, that he doesn't need her approval to feel okay in himself. And comfort is extraordinarily attractive because it's rare. Most people are quietly anxious in social situations. When someone isn't, when they can just sit in a moment without flinching, it registers deeply. It says, this person has somewhere to stand. When a woman seems to pull back just as things are going well, or challenges something you've said when there was no obvious reason to, most men read it as rejection. They panic, they overcorrect, they apologize, or they get defensive. But here's what's actually happening in those moments. She isn't pushing you away. She's checking to see if you're still standing. Women understand, often from years of experience, that the version of a man you see early on isn't always the full picture. So she applies a little pressure, not to be cruel, but to find out whether the person in front of her is real. A man who stays calm, who doesn't collapse or explode or fall over himself trying to smooth things over. That man passes a test most men don't even realize they're taking. And once you understand that, those moments stop being terrifying and start being opportunities. There's a distinction that changes everything once you really understand it. And it's the difference between being needed and being wanted. A lot of men focus on making themselves necessary, being available, being helpful, being the one she calls when something goes wrong. And that's not nothing. But being needed and being wanted are two completely different emotional experiences. Need is practical. Want is magnetic. She might stay with someone she needs, but she obsesses over someone she wants. And what creates that wanting is not usefulness. It's the feeling you give her when you're together, a sense that being around you makes her feel more alive, more seen, more like herself. That's not something you can manufacture by being available. It comes from the quality of who you are and how you make her feel. There's a version of emotional availability that most men are afraid of because they think it means becoming vulnerable in a way that costs them their strength. But real emotional availability isn't weakness. It's actually a very specific kind of strength. It means you can acknowledge when something matters to you without falling apart about it. It means you can talk about how you feel without needing her to fix it or validate it. It means that when she opens up to you, you don't get uncomfortable and change the subject. You stay, you hold the space. And that combination, someone who is genuinely open, but who also isn't looking to her to carry their emotional weight, is something most women have never experienced with a man. When they do experience it, they don't forget it. You've probably noticed that the connections that go deepest never feel like hard work. There's a flow to them, where the conversation finds its own momentum, where silence doesn't feel awkward, where you leave each other feeling more energized rather than drained. That isn't an accident. It doesn't happen because two people got lucky. It happens because at least one person in the dynamic is secure enough not to need anything from the interaction. When you're not performing, not managing how you come across, not calculating your next move, you become genuinely easy to be around. And ease is magnetic in a way that effort never quite is. Effort signals anxiety. Ease signals strength. And people are always drawn to the person who seems most at home in themselves. After a great conversation, most people think about what was said. But the thing that makes someone truly linger in your thoughts isn't the content of the conversation. It's the feeling it left behind. She won't replay your words as much as she'll replay how it felt to be around you. Whether she felt understood, whether she felt free to be herself, whether she left the conversation feeling more interesting than when she arrived. That last one is worth sitting with. The people we never forget are often the ones who made us feel more alive, more curious about ourselves, more seen. When you give someone that experience, when your presence genuinely elevates theirs, you don't have to work to stay in their mind. You already are. Everything we've covered in this video comes back to one idea. The men who are impossible to forget are not the ones who gave the most. They're the ones who were most genuinely present. They listened without performing. They stayed without clinging. They opened up without collapsing. They created space without disappearing. And none of that was a strategy. It was simply who they were. The most powerful thing you can offer another person is the full weight of your attention and the genuine quality of your presence. Not because it's a technique, but because in a world that is increasingly distracted and shallow, that kind of depth is extraordinary. And people recognize it, even if they can't always name what it is they're responding to.